Welcome to the Journey of the Universe podcast. My name is Sam King, and today I'm lucky to be joined by the award-winning artist Angela Manno. Angela's art has been featured in numerous exhibitions, including the National Museum of Women in the Arts, the Smithsonian Institution, and the American Museum of Natural History, with works in distinguished public collections, including that of NASA. Her artworks are in private collections throughout the Americas, the Middle East, Europe, and Southeast Asia, and in distinguished public collections, including NASA and the Smithsonian Institution's National Air and Space Museum. In 2022, the Vatican commissioned Angela to create a visual prayer featuring her art, celebrating the 7-year anniversary of Pope Francis's groundbreaking encyclical Laudato Si on care for our common home. Angela's artwork has been noted in numerous publications, including National Catholic Reporter, National Wildlife Magazine, Art News, Tree Hugger, Smithsonian Magazine, and is featured on the cover of numerous books, including the forthcoming Beyond Factory Farming, a contemplative prophetic approach to food by James Robinson, and Come Have Breakfast, Meditations on God and Earth by feminist theologian Elizabeth Johnson. Angela is a graduate of Bard College and studied art at the San Francisco Art Institute, Parsons School of Design, and l'École des Arts in Lacoste, France, through Sarah Lawrence College. She trained with master iconographer Vladislav Andreev in the ancient liturgical art of Byzantine Russian iconography. Angela, thanks so much for speaking with us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Sam.
Such a gift to reconnect with you and to hear more of your story behind your awe-inspiring art. And I thought we would begin by just asking you what first allured you to begin painting the biodiversity of our natural world?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, there's a story behind that because originally I was painting traditional Byzantine Russian iconography, so an anthropocentric focus on man's relationship to God. After a certain point, it was very healing, a very beautiful medium, and I learned so much. But there was a little bit of a hesitancy because having been also an informal student of Thomas Berry and the new cosmology and ecology, something I felt was missing. And what I wanted to do is bring nature to the forefront of my work. So the thought was to expand the canon of images of the tradition and include images of animals. And so the first piece that I did as an icon was actually the whole Earth from space. That was sort of like, set the tone. And then not too much later, I started reading about the biodiversity crisis, in particular the honeybee and all of the challenges and the intelligence and the beauty and that they were really in trouble with the colony collapse disorder. And so that was the first icon of an endangered species that I chose. And then it kind of grew. From 2016 is when I began the series in earnest.
Amazing. And yeah, it's inspiring to see how your personal affinity with the more than human world has spilled onto the canvas and the way that your art is helping to evoke this experience of biophilia or a deep love and empathy for the honeybee or these magnificent creatures that you render on the page. I wonder if you could talk more. You mentioned the influence of Thomas Berry, the great cultural historian and passionist priest, on your work, who has also been a huge inspiration behind the Journey of the Universe project, especially with his essay, The New Story.
Well, I was thinking about that, and really what it is context and perspective. So I had been going along my merry way, and as an artist, and also understanding that each person is creative, and not just creative in the sense that they can make art or compose a symphony, but actually can create their lives the way they want. But it wasn't until I came across the new cosmology that it set the context for everything. It was the framework, because I learned that the universe itself is creative. And so, of course, so are we. So my own creativity made more sense once I understood it within a cosmological framework. He also, I mean, he was a dear friend, and as you know, he didn't pull any punches with whenever he spoke or wrote. And one of the things he said that comes from the determining features of the Ecozoic era is this quote, which I use frequently. While the human cannot make a blade of grass, there is liable not to be a blade of grass unless it is accepted, protected, and fostered by the human. You know, this is completely existential. And so, in fact, in my exhibition in Scotland coming up, that's going to be a quote that goes above my icon. So I'm very happy about that. And the other was, he quoted Thomas Aquinas. And this put a context to what I was doing, or confirmed what I was doing with the icons, which I'd love to read. It's because the divine could not image itself forth in any one being. It created the great diversity of things, so that what was lacking in one would be supplied by the other, and the whole universe together would participate in and manifest the divine more than any single being whatsoever. So biodiversity is really the expression of the Creator. That's what I'm trying to convey. That's a biocentric form of knowing and sensibility. So
Beautiful. I love how you're rooting the experience of biodiversity both in the immense creativity of the universe and in creation spirituality, which has roots in folks like Thomas Aquinas and other eco-theologians. It's amazing to think of ourselves as the conscious self-expression of the earth and of the larger universe. And in some ways, your work is helping to awaken in the human this sense of ourselves as in deep relationship with all these other creatures. The sense that we cannot be fully ourselves without all of our kin throughout the more than human world. We know that through the ways that honeybees are so essential for pollination and for pollinating the plants that make our food. And so this deep interconnectedness, I think, just really is so imbued in your work in such a beautiful way. I wonder if you could talk about the materials you use to produce your artwork, because I know that this sort of organic, natural imagery also informs the practice and technique you use.
I'd be happy to. It's one of the great joys of this discipline, because all of the materials are natural because you're giving glory to God. And so you use them in their natural state. So there's earth ochres, and there's ground up semi-precious stones, wood, clay. So, and they all are symbolic. So that's something you learn along the way. I learned from my teacher. And they're absolutely beautiful. I mean, each pigment has a different property. So you would apply the coarse pigments to when you're working on the stage of chaos. So it's very turbulent. And then as you create the different layers, they become more refined. So you're working from darkness to light. So the materials themselves are not only beautiful in and of themselves, but it's a recapitulation of the act of our own creation.
I love that sense of, honoring the ground of the earth and this integrity of creation in the way you also approach your art. I remember learning that the word for Adam in the Genesis story comes from the Hebrew Adamah, which means ground, or another biblical scholar actually translated that as topsoil. So it's so interesting that this archetypal first human in the Genesis story is emerging from the ground. And it seems like your art is really reflecting that sensibility using clay and other natural materials?
Well, actually, I was going to say exactly that because the use of clay in the icons is it's a substrate for gold. So the
Hmm.
clay represents our physical nature,
Hmm.
and the gold is our divine nature. So we're actually
Hmm.
a blend of those two things. So that's also when you're making a halo, and whenever I'm doing gold, that's how you start. You start with the earth. Mm.
That's beautiful and really profound. I hadn't thought about that sort of fusion of clay and gold before in your work. I wonder if you could tell us more about your icons of threatened and endangered species. I know I've had a chance to see them firsthand, these extraordinary icons at an exhibit you did at Yale's Institute for Sacred Music. I know these icons have traveled all around the world. I wonder if you could tell us more about the creatures you depict and what they represent and can offer us in this time.
So I chose to treat each of the categories equally so that there are an equal number of mammals, fish, birds, insects, invertebrates, amphibians, and fish. And so there are 36 of them. So I just chose them on the basis of actually some were it was a matter of urgency, like the manatee, for instance, is a marine mammal, and learning about how threatened they are because their food source, seagrass, is is dying because of the pollution that we let into the waterways. There's also lots of threats. So there were certain animals that I was just attracted to, but also I even made choices in terms of color because I wanted to have, I imagined how they would all look together. So it was like, oh, I don't have red, So I would look up, I found this Hawaiian scarlet honeycreeper, which is just a magnificent bird that's losing its habitat because it has to keep climbing higher and higher to get away from the mosquitoes that they develop a disease because of it. So they have to go higher where the mosquitoes can't live yet. And so their range is really, really small now.
It's inspiring to see the creatures that have really allured you and drawn you in, from the manatee to the orangutan to the emperor penguin. I remember that scene of the orangutan mother and baby
Mm-hmm.
is such a, profound, like archetypal symbol of the divine feminine. And I wonder if you could talk about that particular image. I have a affinity for the orangutan going back to third grade when I did a school project on the orangutan.
Oh,
And
you did?
yeah, I would just be curious, like what inspired you to portray the orangutan in that style?
Well, it's interesting because there are so many possibilities when you decide on depicting one of these animals, and so it's very intuitive. I would say, I'd go, no, not that, not that, not that, and then I think because of the gaze of the mother and child, I mean, it's very deep. That's what people tend to notice about it, and of course
Yeah.
they're going to be extinct in the wild in 10 years if we don't do something, drastic, if there's not an intervention. And the Sumatran orangutan, which I depict in this icon you're talking about, is in Indonesia, of course, and the Indonesian government just gives land to various, logging operations, palm oil plantations, and oh, hello to you. And yes, and I saw one video of this this orangutan going to war with a bulldozer, and it was absolutely heartbreaking, So I also want to bring people's attention to the urgency of these creature situations. So yes, but it does have a very profound effect on people when they see these images.
Absolutely. And Yeah, it's heartbreaking to think about the plight of orangutans and deforestation because of palm oil plantations or other effects of climate change or logging. And I am struck by the way your icons, as you mentioned, often have these really luminous eyes that reflect back to us. And I wonder if you could say more about that sort of visceral impact of gazing upon the eyes of some of these creatures, some of whom live in other parts of the world or underwater, some creatures that we may seldom even see physically. But what does that kind of connection spark for you?
Well, I think it comes from the my study in traditional Byzantine Russian iconography, where the gaze is really central. If you think about the icons of, the Theotokos, which is the Mother of God, and there's an emphasis on the gaze. So I really tried to emphasize where I could, because it was hard to show the gaze of a ladybug, let's say, or some of the other invertebrates. But it is something that connects us somehow. The gaze, the consciousness, the presence of these creatures, which is what I try to convey. But it's in them, it's not something I'm adding to it, it's there. And so I'm just bringing it out, from what
Mm.
I see.
Yeah, it's remarkable how you've drawn on this ancient tradition of iconography and extended beyond the human saints to really lift up this saintly presence in the more than human world. It's like this both drawing on tradition and also expanding our understanding of the sacred or the holy beyond the bounds of the human. I'm wondering if you could also talk about the way these icons have featured in the upcoming book by Jim Robinson on
Hmm.
factory farming, which I know is such a sobering topic. Over 99% of meat that is consumed typically comes from industrial agriculture and factory farms. And on the cover of the book, you have these really arresting and poignant icons of a pig and a cow experiencing factory farming. I wonder if you could talk more about those emerging icons.
Well, you know, uh, actually, this came about because I met Jim at Iona, and he mentioned that he was going to be writing a book on factory farming, and I said, I want to do that. I mean, I saw it in my head, what I would do. And these animals are actually portrayed in their glory, which is what I always do. I don't, there's enough suffering that, we can access that by reading in the news and stuff. My exposure to Jim eventually led to me being a vegetarian. I was like, I didn't want to be part of that suffering. And the more I saw about what was going on, it was like, how could I be a part of this? So I'm sure his book is going to make a great impact. And the animals that I did, these are the animals that we live on, you know. And so bringing our awareness to their conditions and their gentleness and their lovely beings, But in the factory farming industry, they're treated like things. So yeah, I was very glad to kind of expand the range of images to include these creatures. There's also a chicken and a salmon on the
Mm,
cover, and
mm,
people don't understand that salmon farming is very, very cruel and also polluting. So there's no
mm,
easy way.
mm. It's a very visceral sense of Thomas Berry's idea that the universe is a communion of subjects, not a collection of objects. And I think these icons are helping us to see that interiority, that subjectivity in factory farmed animals, right? We know that pigs have many of the same intelligences of dogs, for instance, and we love dogs and often live with them, but somehow other species like pigs are subjected to such terrible conditions. And so I think it is a really powerful way of helping to bring us into this communion experience or this state of deep relationship with these living beings, that we share this earth with. And of course, we know that industrial agriculture makes up an enormous footprint in terms of deforestation and greenhouse gas emissions. In some estimates, larger than the entire transportation sector combined from industrial agriculture. So, and obviously that has huge impacts on biodiversity too. So I really appreciate the way your icons are helping to make us more aware of the true costs of animal agriculture.
Yeah, that's my hope.
Absolutely. Which is a great segue to some of your latest work, which is really focused on this Sacred Biodiversity Oracle deck, this
Mhm.
36 card series that's helping to deepen and make even more accessible some of your remarkable painting. Tell us a little bit more about that particular Oracle deck.
Well, can I show you the book?
Please do.
This is the guidebook, and it comes with 36 cards of all these endangered and threatened species. And within it is a journey. So, first, you have an introduction that really sets the tone and describes principles of eco-spirituality and what is biodiversity. So it kind of sets the stage. And then you go to, well, you would pick a card. Okay. Well, you don't have a set, so I'll just pick a card, okay? So the horseshoe crab, for instance. So it starts off with the category of wisdom, which tells you basic facts about the animal. What's its IUCN status. And for instance, the horseshoe crab is more than a half a billion years old. And yet their numbers are in steep decline due to human activity, particularly within the biomedical field. So you learn that the biomedical industry bleeds horseshoe crabs to manufacture a detector for bacterial contamination, even though synthetic alternatives exist today. So they're still using these living beings for this industry, and it's not necessary. It's probably cheaper, and that's probably why they're still doing it. It should be outlawed. And they're also used for bait. These numinous creatures are, being used. Again, it's very similar to the way we use animals in factory farming. It's, without a thought to their sentience or their intelligence. In any case, then you move to, after you kind of gotten an idea of what the plight is of the animal, then you get to do some contemplation. And for each animal, there is a Visio Divina exercise. So in the Eastern religions, there's a lot of emphasis on the image and gazing, and certainly in the Orthodox Christian tradition, of course, because the icons are an integral part of the liturgy. So in Visio Divina, you have instructions to get how to gaze upon the image and notice what shapes and details and colors you notice and what feelings arise. So this is exercising your intuition. So you get the didactic, then you get the intuitive workout, and then you meditate on the aspect of the image that most deeply speaks to you. And is there a message for you? So I don't tell people what the message is, which is what oracle decks are. This is really, you become the oracle. You dive into the reality of this animal and can participate with it in an imaginative way. And then you get to reflect, which can be journaling or automatic writing. I give suggestions of how to do that. And then there's action. So the final movement is action. And it tells you how to engage. So each card has, I'll pull out one so you can see it. Each card has a QR code on it so that you can scan it and go to, oh, here's the orangutan. So you scan that QR code and it'll take you to the orangutan project. And that's a very, very important organization. And what they're trying to do is purchase land from the Indonesian government to keep it in perpetuity. Because, well, anyway, so you find out all about how you can engage, from nonviolent direct action to volunteering, donating. There's a lot of suggestions here, and that's pretty much it. And I also have a section for a group exercise, which I'm very excited about because, when you have people together, you can create a kind of synergy. So, but anyway, there's instructions there for group exercises. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
Amazing. I
Yeah.
love how holistic this experience is with the contemplation, the ecological facts and conditions of these creatures, and then ways to engage, ways to help out. It's such a powerful fusion of contemplation and action. And as we come
I'm
to,
an
please.
activist. I'm an activist at heart, so I couldn't possibly leave that out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course. At a time where we're living through the Earth's sixth mass extinction, which is being exacerbated by climate change, these issues are urgent. And so your art is a call to action, a call to conscience and action. And so, as we come to a close in our conversation for today, Angela, what is your hope for the afterlives of these icons? Where do you see opportunities for really living into this ecological way of life?
Well, obviously, we have to adopt an attitude of kindness to other creatures. I mean, kindness, who is it? I think it was the Dalai Lama that said kindness is his religion. I mean, that applies to being kind to oneself, kind to each other, and kind to the environment, to the trees, the waters, everything that supports the sacred web of life, including these creatures. Pope Francis called it an ecological conversion. That's what I'm after. And I know it's just a small way. I mean, some people do vision quests, some people go on long periods in the wilderness, whatever it takes. But I'm hoping that what I have to offer is a really accessible way to understand the situation, to understand how our minds need a conversion. And I think we can live happily ever after, truly. I don't think there's any need for this kind of conflict because if I think it was E.F. Schumacher said, if man often speaks of a war with nature, if he won the war, he'd be on the losing side. So it's existential. It's not just a spiritual crisis. It's both, but I think it's ultimately a spiritual crisis because that's what dictates our actions.
Absolutely. I'm reminded of Thomas Berry's phrase that we will go into the future as one sacred community or we will perish in the desert. It's that idea that we need one another. We need all of our earthly kin to sustain a flourishing presence on this planet for future generations. And so I see your art as an acupuncture point in prompting us to undergo this deep ecological conversion, which is the cornerstone for so many modes of transformation needed. So I just
Yeah.
want to applaud you for all of your amazing ongoing work and just give you a chance if you have any parting message for our audience.
Well, for me, beauty is a real access point. And to recognize the beauty that's around us, to somehow break this trance that we're in. Terence McKenna calls it a species-centered narcissism. It's really, a psychological problem, and that we can strive, to become part of this beautiful creation instead of thinking that we somehow can dominate it, I think is something that we can all achieve because we all have a deep sense of beauty. We can recognize it. It's just whether we whether those veils will be removed from our eyes. So
Mhm. Well, here's to reawakening to this beauty all around us. So thank you so much for taking the time to speak today, Angela. Thanks for all the inspiration that your artwork continues to give to so many of us. We look forward to sharing your latest work with this Sacred Biodiversity Oracle deck with our audience. And thanks so much for taking the time to chat.
thank you. It's been a deep pleasure. Thank you so much, Sam.